The realm below. Beneath the earth lay a kingdom unseen by mortal eyes, yet destined for all to enter. This was the underworld, realm of Hades, lord of the dead. It was not a place of fire and brimstone, as some later imagined, but a shadowed land where all souls went, whether great or humble, just or wicked. The entrance to this realm lay at the edge of the world, beyond rivers and caves. The dead were ferried across the river Styx by Charon, the grim boatman, who demanded payment in the form of a coin placed in the mouth of the deceased. Those without coin wandered the shores, restless and unburied. At the gates stood Cerberus, the three-headed hound, whose growl kept souls from fleeing back to the world of the living. Beyond stretched meadows of asphodel, where the majority of souls dwelled in pale silence. But the underworld was not the same for all. Within it were regions that reflected the life one had lived. The virtuous and heroic were led to the Elysian fields, green and sunlit, where joy and music never ceased. Those guilty of terrible crimes were cast into Tartarus, the deepest abyss, where they suffered eternal punishments. And between them lay the halls of judgment, where the dead stood before three judges: Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. With wisdom and impartiality, they weighed the deeds of each soul and sent them to their fate. Hades and Persephone. Hades himself ruled with stern majesty. Unlike his brothers, he was neither tempestuous like Poseidon nor thunderous like Zeus. He was solemn, unyielding, and just, the embodiment of death itself. Though feared, he was not cruel. He kept order in his realm, ensuring that none escaped their fated end. Yet even the stern ruler of the dead knew love. The tale is told of Persephone, daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest. One day, as she gathered flowers in a meadow, the earth split open, and Hades rose in his chariot, dark steeds blazing. He seized Persephone and carried her down into his shadowed realm, making her his queen. Demeter searched the earth in grief, neglecting her duties. Crops withered, fields lay barren, famine spread among mortals. Zeus, seeing the suffering of mankind, sent Hermes to negotiate. Persephone could return, but because she had eaten seeds of a pomegranate in the underworld, she was bound there for part of the year. Thus a bargain was struck. For half the year Persephone dwelt with her mother, bringing spring and summer. For the other half she returned to Hades, and Demeter's grief brought autumn and winter. So the cycle of seasons was born, bound to the rhythm of Persephone's journey. And so she became queen of the underworld, standing beside Hades not in fear, but as partner and ruler, guiding the souls of the dead. The punishments of Tartarus. In Tartarus lay those who had defied gods and nature. There, the rebel titans groaned in chains. There, monstrous Typhon lay buried. And among mortal sinners, punishments fit their crimes: Sisyphus, who tricked death itself, rolling a boulder endlessly up a hill, only for it to roll back each time. Tantalus, who betrayed the gods by serving his own son at a feast, stood in a pool of water that receded when he bent to drink, beneath fruit that withdrew when he reached. Ixion, who tried to seduce Hera, was bound to a flaming wheel that spun eternally. The Danaids, 50 sisters who murdered their husbands, filled a bottomless jar with water that leaked away forever. These tales were warnings, reminders that the gods' justice reached beyond life into eternity. Orpheus and Eurydice. Among the most haunting tales of the underworld is that of Orpheus, the greatest musician of Greece. With his lyre, he could charm wild beasts, calm rivers, and even sway the stones themselves. He loved Eurydice, a maiden of grace, and they were wed. But tragedy struck, and she died, bitten by a serpent. Orpheus, unwilling to let her go, descended into Hades itself. With his music, he moved even the stern heart of Hades and the sorrow of Persephone. They granted him a gift: Eurydice might return with him, but on one condition: he must not look back at her until both had reached the world above. Orpheus led the way, and Eurydice followed, her steps light as a shadow. They neared the threshold, the light of the sun flickering ahead. But doubt crept into Orpheus's heart. Was she truly there? He turned. In that instant, Eurydice was drawn back into darkness, her form fading, her hand slipping from his. A second chance was not given. Grief-stricken, Orpheus wandered the earth, singing songs of sorrow, until at last he, too, met his end. The tale of Orpheus was sung for centuries as a lesson in faith, patience, and the fragility of hope. Heroes who descended. Orpheus was not the only one to brave the underworld. Hercules descended as one of his labors, to bring back Cerberus. With strength unmatched, he wrestled the three-headed beast and dragged it to the world of the living, only to return it unharmed. Theseus and Perseus dared to enter, seeking to steal Persephone herself. But their hubris doomed them. They sat upon the chairs of forgetfulness, unable to rise. Only Theseus was freed, rescued by Hercules. Perseus remained trapped forever. Even Odysseus, on his long journey, entered the shadowed land, guided by Circe. There he met the shade of Tiresias, who prophesied his future, and the spirits of his mother, his comrades, and heroes long dead. The underworld, then, was not just a place of death, but a place of truth, where the living glimpsed what awaited all. The Moirai, weavers of fate. Above and beyond even Hades were the Moirai, the Fates. Three sisters who spun, measured, and cut the thread of every life: Clotho the spinner, Lachesis the measurer, Atropos the cutter. Not even Zeus could overrule them. They determined the moment of birth and the hour of death, for kings and beggars alike, for heroes and cowards. The thread was spun and cut. Though feared, they were also honored, for without fate, the world would be chaos. In their weaving lay order, destiny, and the balance of all things. Persephone's power. Over time, Persephone herself became more than a captive queen. She was seen as a goddess of duality, of death and of rebirth, of sorrow and of renewal. Through her, mortals found hope that death was not an end, but a passage. The Eleusinian mysteries, secret rites held in her and Demeter's honor, promised initiates knowledge of the afterlife and hope of blessings beyond the grave. Though their details were never revealed, they remained among the most sacred rites of Greece for centuries. Thus the queen of the underworld became not merely a symbol of loss, but of eternal return. The nature of death in myth. In Greek thought, death was inevitable, even for heroes. Yet the tales of the underworld gave it shape, meaning, and depth. It was not merely the end of life, but a realm, a journey, a continuation. To die was to cross a river, to pass through gates, to stand before judgment, to dwell in shadow or light. To live well was to earn the Elysian fields, to live wickedly was to fall into Tartarus. And always, the living honored the dead with rites and offerings, for to be forgotten was the truest death of all. The underworld myths reminded mortals of their fragility, their dependence on the gods, and the weight of their choices. They taught that fate could not be escaped, but that within its bounds, honor, love, and courage gave life meaning. Jason and the Quest for the Golden Fleece. Another hero whose name echoed through ages was Jason, leader of the Argonauts. His story began with betrayal. His father Aeson, rightful king of Iolcus, was usurped by his brother Peleus. Jason, hidden in safety, grew to manhood, and returned to claim his birthright. Peleus, fearing prophecy that he would fall to a man with one sandal, saw Jason arrive, having lost a sandal crossing a river. Pretending welcome, Peleus set him a task he thought impossible, to fetch the golden fleece from Colchis, far at the edge of the world. Jason gathered a band of heroes, the Argonauts, who sailed in the ship Argo. Among them were Hercules, Orpheus the musician, Atalanta the swift huntress, and many more. Their journey was filled with trials, harpies that tormented a blind prophet, clashing rocks that crushed ships, and strange islands. At last they reached Colchis, where King Aetes set Jason impossible tasks, to yoke fire-breathing bulls, to sow a field with dragon's teeth from which armed warriors would spring, and to slay the serpent that guarded the fleece. Here love shaped fate. Medea, daughter of Aetes and a sorceress, fell in love with Jason by the will of Aphrodite. With her aid, Jason yoked the bulls, tricked the warriors, and lulled the serpent to sleep. He seized the fleece and fled with Medea, pursued by her father. But Jason's tale turned dark. Though he returned victorious, though he reclaimed his throne, his bond with Medea ended in betrayal. Seeking another marriage, Jason abandoned her. In fury, Medea slew their own children and fled, leaving Jason broken. He died years later, alone and forgotten, crushed by a rotting beam of the Argo. Thus Jason's triumph ended in ruin, a lesson that glory can fade, and betrayal can unravel even the mightiest. These heroes Perseus, Hercules, Theseus, Jason stood as bridges between gods and men. Their tales told of courage and cunning, of love and betrayal, of triumph and tragedy. Through them, mortals found reflections of their own struggles, elevated into legend. For though gods were eternal, it was heroes, mortal yet extraordinary, who showed mankind what it meant to strive against fate itself. Part 5, The Trojan Cycle. Helen, Paris, Achilles, Troy, and the Odyssey. The Seeds of War. The tale of Troy begins not on the battlefield, but at a wedding. When Peleus, a mortal king, wed Thetis, a sea goddess, the gods gathered on Olympus to celebrate. All were invited except Eris, goddess of strife. Spurned, she came anyway, carrying a golden apple inscribed with 3 words, "For the fairest." She cast the apple into the midst of the goddesses. At once Hera, queen of heaven, Athena, goddess of wisdom, and Aphrodite, goddess of love, each claimed it. Their quarrel shook Olympus, for none would yield. To settle the dispute, Zeus appointed Paris, prince of Troy, to judge. Paris was a shepherd at the time, living upon Mount Ida, though of royal blood. Each goddess sought to bribe him. Hera promised dominion and kingship over all men. Athena promised wisdom and victory in battle. Aphrodite promised the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite, handing her the golden apple. From that choice, ruin flowed, for the most beautiful woman was Helen, wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta. Paris journeyed to Sparta, where he was welcomed as guest. But Aphrodite's power worked, and Helen abandoned her husband, sailing with Paris to Troy. Menelaus raged, and with his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, called upon all Greece to war. For Helen had many suitors once, and each had sworn an oath to defend her marriage. Bound by honor, they gathered under Agamemnon's banner. Thus began the greatest war Greece had ever known. The Gathering of Heroes. From every land the kings came. Odysseus of Ithaca, cunning and reluctant, leaving wife Penelope and infant son Telemachus. Ajax, towering and strong, second only to Achilles in might. Diomedes, fierce warrior and friend to Athena. Nestor, aged but wise, guiding with counsel. And Achilles, son of Peleus and Thetis, greatest of all warriors. His mother, knowing his fate, dipped him as an infant in the river Styx, making him invulnerable save for the heel by which she held him. The fleet gathered at Aulis, 1,000 ships strong. Yet the winds would not blow. The prophet Colchis revealed that Artemis was angered, and only by the sacrifice of Agamemnon's daughter Iphigenia would the fleet sail. Agamemnon, torn between duty and love, yielded to the will of the gods. His daughter was brought, and though some say Artemis spared her, the sacrifice was made. The winds rose, and the fleet set forth to Troy. The war at Troy. For 10 years the war raged before the walls of Troy. The Trojans, led by King Priam, defended with courage. His sons stood beside him, noble Hector, the city's shield, Paris, whose choice had begun the war, and many others who fought with valor. The Greeks assaulted with fury. Yet the walls of Troy, built by Poseidon and Apollo, stood unbroken. Battles ebbed and flowed, heroes clashed, gods themselves took sides, Athena, Hera, and Poseidon aiding the Greeks, while Aphrodite, Apollo, and Ares aided Troy. At the heart of the war was Achilles. His wrath and might turned the tide of battles, yet his pride nearly doomed the Greeks. For when Agamemnon insulted him, seizing his prize Briseis, Achilles withdrew from battle. Without him, the Greeks faltered. Hector, prince of Troy, rose in glory, driving the Greeks back to their ships, setting fire to their camp. Yet in desperation, Patroclus, dearest companion of Achilles, donned his armor and entered the fray. He fought bravely but was slain by Hector. When news reached Achilles, grief consumed him. His wrath blazed anew, no longer against Agamemnon but against Hector. He returned to battle, clad in armor forged by Hephaestus himself, shield gleaming with the whole world engraved upon it. Achilles pursued Hector around the walls of Troy 3 times before they faced each other. With spear guided by Athena, Achilles struck Hector down. In fury he lashed the body to his chariot, dragging it before the walls. Yet in the night, old Priam, guided by Hermes, came to Achilles' tent. He clasped the knees of his son's killer and begged for Hector's body. Moved by the grief of a father, Achilles relented and returned the body for burial. For a time, the war paused. The death of Achilles. The war, however, dragged on. Paris, with Apollo's aid, shot an arrow that struck Achilles in his one vulnerable place, his heel. Thus fell the greatest warrior of Greece. A fierce quarrel arose among the Greeks for his armor, forged by Hephaestus. Ajax the Great and Odysseus contended for it. The judges awarded it to Odysseus, whose cunning was more valued than brute strength. In shame and fury, Ajax fell upon his own sword. Still, the war dragged, and the Greeks sought new ways to end it. They captured the Trojan seer Helenus, who revealed that Troy could not fall until the bow of Hercules was wielded, and until the Palladium, sacred statue of Athena, was stolen from the city. Odysseus and Diomedes stole the statue by night, and the bow was brought by Philoctetes, who had been abandoned years before on an island. With these, the Greeks pressed on. The fall of Troy. At last, Odysseus devised the stratagem that ended Troy. He built a great wooden horse, hollow within, and filled it with Greek warriors. The rest of the army burned their camp and sailed away, so it seemed. The Trojans, believing the Greeks had fled, brought the horse into the city as a trophy, ignoring warnings from Cassandra, Priam's daughter, cursed to speak truth yet never believed, and from Laocoon, priest of Apollo, who cried, "Beware Greeks bearing gifts." When serpents rose from the sea and devoured Laocoon, the Trojans thought it was punishment for blasphemy and welcomed the horse. That night, as the Trojans slept, the hidden warriors crept out and opened the gates. The Greek army, which had returned under cover of darkness, poured into the city. Troy burned. Priam was slain at the altar. Hector's son was hurled from the walls. Women were taken as slaves, Cassandra dragged to Agamemnon, Andromache to Neoptolemus. Thus fell Troy, not by strength of arms alone, but by cunning and deception. The Odyssey, the journey of Odysseus. Though Troy burned, the story did not end. The Greeks returned home, but many faced ruin on the sea. Agamemnon was slain by his wife Clytemnestra. Menelaus wandered far before reclaiming Helen. And Odysseus, king of Ithaca, began the longest journey of all. For 10 years he wandered, seeking to return home. He faced the Cyclops Polyphemus, whom he blinded, bringing upon himself the wrath of Poseidon. He sailed past the Sirens, whose song lured sailors to death. He braved Scylla, the 6-headed monster, and Charybdis, the whirlpool. He lingered on the island of Circe, who turned men into swine, and then descended into the underworld to seek prophecy. He dwelt with Calypso, a nymph who loved him and offered immortality, yet longed always for home. At last, aided by Athena, he returned to Ithaca after 20 years. There he found his halls overrun with suitors who sought Penelope, his faithful wife. Disguised as a beggar, Odysseus tested them, then revealed himself. With bow in hand, he slew the suitors, reclaimed his throne, and embraced Penelope, who had waited faithfully. Thus ended the long war, not with the fall of Troy alone, but with the long return of its victors. The Trojan cycle, sung by poets, told not only of glory but of grief. It showed the folly of pride, the danger of passion, the cost of betrayal, and the endurance of cunning and faith. Its echoes reached through centuries, shaping the soul of Greece, reminding mortals and gods alike of the power of fate. Ares, god of war. Ares, son of Zeus and Hera, was the personification of war's fury. Where Athena planned and strategized, Ares reveled in the clash of spears, the scream of dying men, the chaos of battle. He was hated by many gods, even by Zeus, who called him the most hateful of his children. Yet mortals prayed to him before battle, for his strength could turn the tide. Ares was not only destruction. He fathered children with mortal women, spreading the lineage of warriors. With Aphrodite, whom he loved passionately, he bore sons and daughters who embodied love and strife together. In him lay the truth of war, hated yet ever present, destructive yet inescapable. Aphrodite, goddess of love. From the foam of the sea she arose, Aphrodite, goddess of beauty, love, and desire. Her charm was irresistible, her smile capable of swaying gods and men alike. She was wife to Hephaestus, the smith, but her heart belonged to Ares, and from their union came children who personified both passion and conflict. Aphrodite's power was subtle yet absolute. She could cause kings to fall for shepherdesses, gods to abandon oaths, men to cross seas for beauty. It was she who promised Helen to Paris, sparking the Trojan War. Her gifts brought joy, but also ruin, for love is both delight and torment. Hephaestus, god of the forge. Lame in one leg, cast from Olympus by his mother Hera for his imperfection, Hephaestus rose from suffering to mastery. In his volcanic forges he crafted wonders for gods: Zeus's thunderbolts, Athena's shield, Achilles' armor. Though mocked by some for his limp, his skill made him indispensable. He was husband to Aphrodite, though her love strayed. Yet Hephaestus bore the betrayal with cunning, once ensnaring her and Ares in a golden net, exposing them before all gods. Still, he remained the patient craftsman, embodiment of resilience, skill, and the dignity of labor. Hermes, the trickster. Swift-footed Hermes, son of Zeus and the nymph Maia, was born in the morning and by evening had stolen Apollo's cattle. Clever and mischievous, he invented the lyre to appease his brother, and so began his role as mediator and trickster. Hermes guided travelers, protected merchants, and carried messages for Zeus. He alone could move freely between Olympus, Earth, and the underworld. He was patron of thieves and traitors, liars, and diplomats alike. Though playful, he was also compassionate, often aiding mortals with wit and cunning rather than brute force. Dionysus, god of wine. Last of the Olympians was Dionysus, born of Zeus and the mortal Semele. Hera, jealous, deceived Semele into asking Zeus to reveal his divine form, and she perished in flame. But Zeus saved the child, sewing him into his own thigh until the time of birth. Thus Dionysus was born twice, god of wine, ecstasy, and madness. He wandered the world, spreading the gift of the vine, teaching mortals to cultivate grapes, to press wine, to celebrate with song and dance. Yet his power was double-edged, for wine brings joy but also frenzy. His followers, the Maenads, often fell into ecstatic madness, tearing animals or even men to pieces in their wild rites. Dionysus was both joy and terror, freedom and destruction, laughter and madness. Among the Olympians, he was youngest, but his power could intoxicate gods and mortals alike. And so, upon Olympus, each god shone with their domain, their passions, and their flaws. To mortals, they were both protectors and destroyers, givers of gifts and bringers of ruin. To worship them was to honor the forces of life itself, forces too vast to ignore. Part 4, The Great Heroes Perseus, Hercules, Theseus, Jason. When mortals looked up at Olympus, they saw gods who were immortal, radiant, and beyond decay. Yet they also longed for figures closer to themselves, men and women who carried divine blood, but still faced fear, hunger, and death. These were the heroes, born often of a god and a mortal, straddling two worlds. Their deeds shaped the stories of Greece as much as the battles of the gods. They slew monsters, founded cities, sought glory, and bore the burdens of fate. Among these heroes, 4 stand brightest in the tapestry of Greek myth: Perseus, Hercules, Theseus, and Jason. Their adventures, woven with both divine aid and human courage, carried lessons of triumph and tragedy alike. Perseus, slayer of Medusa. The story of Perseus begins with a prophecy. Odysseus, king of Argos, learned from an oracle that his daughter Danae would bear a son destined to kill him. Terrified, he locked Danae in a bronze chamber deep beneath the earth, thinking to keep her untouched by men and safe from fate. But fate cannot be denied. Zeus himself, desiring Danae, descended in the form of golden rain through the roof of her chamber. From this union a child was born, Perseus. When Odysseus discovered the infant, he dared not kill his grandson directly, for fear of divine wrath. Instead, he placed Danae and the child in a chest and cast them into the sea, leaving their survival to chance. But the waves carried them safely to the island of Seriphos, where a fisherman named Dictys drew them from the waters and sheltered them. Years passed, and Perseus grew strong and noble. But the king of the island, Polydex, lusted after Danae and sought to rid himself of her son. He devised a trick. He announced he would wed and demanded each man of Seriphos bring a horse as a gift. Perseus, poor and without a steed, boasted rashly that he could instead bring the head of Medusa, the Gorgon whose gaze turned men to stone. Polydex seized upon the boast and commanded Perseus to make good his words. Alone and unarmed, Perseus might have perished at once. But the gods favored him. Athena came to his side, lending him her wisdom and a polished shield. Hermes gave him a curved blade and winged sandals. The nymphs of the north bestowed a helm of invisibility and a magic satchel to carry the head. Guided by Athena, Perseus sought the Graea, 3 ancient sisters who shared a single eye and tooth among them. By seizing their eye, Perseus forced them to reveal the way to the Gorgon's lair. There, amid a desolate land where stone figures stood frozen in agony, Perseus approached Medusa as she slept. Her hair writhed with living serpents, her face too deadly to behold. Using the polished shield as a mirror, Perseus advanced without looking directly upon her. With one swift stroke, he severed her head. From her blood sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and the warrior Chrysaor. As the other Gorgons awoke and shrieked in fury, Perseus donned his helm of invisibility and escaped, carrying Medusa's head in his satchel. On his return journey he passed Ethiopia, where he found Princess Andromeda chained to a rock, offered as sacrifice to a sea monster. With Medusa's head, he turned the beast to stone and freed her, taking her as his bride. When Perseus returned to Seriphos, he found his mother beset by the cruel desires of Polydex. In righteous wrath he revealed Medusa's head, turning the tyrant and his court into stone. Perseus restored Dictys as king, gave Medusa's head to Athena to mount upon her shield, and journeyed onward with Andromeda. In time, the prophecy fulfilled itself. Perseus, while competing in games, threw a discus that struck and killed Acrisius, his grandfather. Thus fate completed its circle, as it always does, no matter the efforts of men. Perseus's line endured, and from it came heroes and kings, even Hercules himself. Hercules, the strongest of mortals. Among all heroes, none shone brighter than Hercules, son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene. From birth he was destined for greatness, yet also for suffering. For Hera, ever jealous of Zeus's affairs, hated the child fiercely. When Heracles lay in his cradle, Hera sent 2 great serpents to slay him. But the infant seized one in each hand and strangled them with ease, showing even then his divine strength. As he grew, he became a man of towering power, a warrior and protector. Yet Hera struck him with madness, and in his frenzy Heracles slew his own wife Megara and their children. When his mind cleared and he saw what he had done, grief consumed him. Seeking purification, he turned to the oracle of Delphi. The oracle declared he must serve King Eurystheus of Tiryns and complete 12 impossible labors. Only then would he find redemption. Thus began the labors of Heracles. 1. The Nemean lion Heracles slew the beast whose hide no weapon could pierce. With his bare hands he strangled it, and ever after wore its skin as armor. 2. The Lernaean hydra, a serpent with many heads, each severed one sprouting 2 more. With his nephew Iolaus' aid, Heracles burned each stump to prevent regrowth and buried the immortal head beneath a rock. 3. The Cyrenaean hind, a golden-horned deer sacred to Artemis, swift as the wind. For a year Heracles pursued it until at last he captured it without drawing blood, appeasing the goddess's wrath. 4. The Erymanthian boar, a monstrous beast ravaging the countryside. Heracles trapped it in snow and carried it alive upon his shoulders. 5. The Augean stables of King Augeas, filthy with the dung of countless cattle for years. Heracles, with cunning, diverted rivers to wash them clean in a single day. 6. The Stymphalian birds, man-eating birds with bronze beaks and wings. With Athena's aid, Heracles frightened them into flight with a rattle and shot them down. 7. The Cretan bull, a mighty bull that ravaged Crete. Hercules seized it and carried it upon his back across the sea. 8. The mares of Diomedes' horses fed on human flesh. Heracles tamed them by feeding them their cruel master. 9. The belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, welcomed Heracles, but Hera stirred mistrust. Battle ensued, and Heracles took the belt by force. 10. The cattle of Geryon. On a far-off island lived Geryon, a giant with 3 bodies. Heracles slew him and drove his cattle back to Greece. 11. The apples of the Hesperides, golden fruit guarded by a dragon. Heracles sought Atlas' aid, holding the sky while Atlas fetched the apples. When Atlas tried to leave him, Heracles tricked him into bearing the heavens once more. 12. The capture of Cerberus. The final labor took him to the underworld itself. Heracles wrestled the 3-headed hound of Hades and brought it to Eurystheus, proving his unmatched might. Through these labors, Heracles endured suffering, toil, and danger beyond mortal measure. Yet his strength and resolve carried him through. But his trials did not end there. Heracles' life was filled with further quests and wars, with victories and tragedies. In the end, betrayed by a poisoned robe given by his wife Deianira, he was consumed in fire. Yet even in death he triumphed, for the gods lifted him to Olympus, granting him immortality. Hera, once his foe, at last accepted him, and Heracles took her daughter Hebe as his bride. Thus Heracles, greatest of mortals, became a god. Theseus, hero of Athens. If Heracles was Greece's strongest, Theseus was Athens' greatest. Son of Aegeus, king of Athens, or in some tales, of Poseidon, Theseus grew with both cunning and courage. When he came of age, he lifted a great stone beneath which his father had hidden sword and sandals, proving his heritage. He set out for Athens, taking the dangerous land route instead of the safer sea. Along the way he slew bandits and monsters, clearing the roads of threats. But Athens was not yet free. Each year it was forced to send 7 youths and 7 maidens to Crete, to be devoured by the Minotaur, a monstrous half-man, half-bull dwelling in the labyrinth built by Daedalus. Theseus volunteered to go, vowing to end the terror. In Crete, he won the love of Ariadne, daughter of King Minos. She gave him a ball of thread, so he might trace his path in the labyrinth. Within the twisting halls, Theseus found the Minotaur. With bare hands and sword, he grappled the beast, at last striking it down. Following the thread, he returned to freedom and led the youths to safety. But fate is never simple. On his return voyage, he forgot to change his ship's black sails to white as promised. His father Aegeus, watching from a cliff, believed his son dead and cast himself into the sea, which bears his name to this day, the Aegean. Thus Theseus became king of Athens, a city destined to shine as the jewel of Greece. Long ago, before the earth was solid beneath our feet, before the sea rolled in endless waves, before the sky arched in blue above the mountains, there was only chaos. Not chaos as we think of it today, with noise and confusion, but rather a great yawning void. An emptiness without form, without shape, without sound. Chaos was the silent backdrop of everything to come, the stillness before the first breath of creation. From this formless chaos, the first beings emerged. They were not gods as we usually imagine them, not yet crowned with thunderbolts or tridents, but rather great elemental presences. The first was Gaia, the earth itself. She spread wide and steady, the foundation upon which all else could rest. Gaia was solid ground, fertile soil, the rich body that would nurture both gods and mortals. Next came Tartarus, a deep abyss beneath the earth. Tartarus was the shadow to Gaia's substance, a place of depth and darkness, a realm of confinement and punishment that would later swallow the defeated and the wicked. Eros, the force of desire, was also born from chaos. Not the playful Cupid with wings that later myths would imagine, but a primal force that stirred creation, binding things together, drawing them into life and love. Without Eros, there would be no union, no growth, no spark to move stillness into being. Alongside them appeared Nyx, the goddess of night, robed in black, and her brother Erebus, the personification of darkness. From Nyx came many children: sleep, dreams, death, strife, shadowy forces that would haunt both gods and men. These first powers were not orderly beings of Olympus, but deep, abstract realities of existence. Gaia, the earth, longed for a companion, and from herself she brought forth Uranus, the sky. He stretched vast and starry above her, a dome of glittering brilliance. When Uranus embraced Gaia, sky and earth came together, and from their union life truly began. From Gaia and Uranus sprang the first mighty race, the Titans. They were 12 in number, vast and powerful. Among them were Oceanus, who encircled the world with his endless waters, Hyperion, the light of the heavens, Themis, the goddess of law and order, Mnemosyne, memory itself, and Rhea, the nurturing mother. Cronus, the youngest, was strong and cunning, and in time he would rise above his siblings. But Gaia and Uranus also birthed stranger children. There were the Cyclopes, one-eyed giants whose gaze was fierce and whose hands would later forge thunderbolts. And there were the Hecatonchires, beings with 100 hands and 50 heads, so monstrous that Uranus shuddered at the sight of them. Uranus, ashamed of his terrible children, forced them back into the womb of Gaia, deep into her belly, hidden from the light of the world. But Gaia groaned in pain. She loved all her children, monstrous or fair, and the weight of Uranus's cruelty pressed heavily upon her. Resentful and suffering, Gaia hatched a plan. She called upon her Titan sons and daughters to rise against their father. Most trembled at the thought, for Uranus was vast and powerful. But Cronus, the youngest, bold and ambitious, did not shrink back. Gaia forged for him a great sickle of flint, sharp and unyielding, and placed it in his hands. When night fell and Uranus came to lie upon Gaia, Cronus emerged from his mother's depths and struck. With one terrible swing, he severed the power of his father. Uranus cried out in anguish as his blood fell upon the earth. From that blood new beings arose, giants of great strength, and the Furies, spirits of vengeance who pursued crimes against kin. From the severed flesh cast into the sea arose Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, born from foam upon the waves. Uranus, defeated, retreated to the heavens, no longer ruling as before. Cronus and his Titan siblings now reigned over the world, and thus began the age of the Titans. Cronus took his sister Rhea as his queen, and together they ruled. The Golden Age, it was called, for under the Titans, the earth yielded its bounty freely, and humankind, still young, lived without toil or sorrow. But Cronus was haunted by fear. For just as he had overthrown his father, he knew one day his own children might overthrow him. A prophecy whispered that one of his sons would rise against him. Determined to prevent this fate, Cronus resolved on a terrible course. Each time Rhea bore him a child, he swallowed it whole. One by one, his children disappeared into his vast belly: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. Rhea wept bitterly as each newborn was taken from her arms, and the earth mourned with her. At last, when she was heavy with her sixth child, Rhea could bear it no longer. She sought help from Gaia and Uranus, who guided her with a secret plan. When the time came, Rhea gave birth not in the halls of Cronus, but in a hidden cave on the island of Crete. There, in the shadows of Mount Ida, she brought forth a son, Zeus. To protect him, Rhea swaddled a stone in baby's clothes and presented it to Cronus. The Titan, unsuspecting, swallowed the stone as he had swallowed all the rest, believing he had consumed his last threat. But the real child remained safe, hidden in the cave, tended by nymphs and guarded by the curettes, warriors who clashed their shields together to drown out the infant's cries. Zeus grew swiftly, nourished by the milk of the divine goat Amalthea and fed on honey. The earth itself seemed to favor him, for he grew strong, clever, and determined. In time, when he was grown, Zeus returned to confront his father. Guided once more by Gaia, Zeus devised a cunning plan. With a potion given to him by the goddess Metis, he tricked Cronus into disgorging the children he had swallowed. One by one they emerged, fully grown and immortal: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. The siblings, long imprisoned, now stood free, their hearts burning with anger against their tyrant father. Together they declared war upon Cronus and the Titans. For 10 years the battle raged, shaking the very foundations of the earth. The Titans, led by Cronus, fought with ancient strength, while the young Olympians, led by Zeus, fought with fury and new power. The struggle became known as the Titanomachy, the War of the Gods. At first the battle stood evenly matched, neither side gaining ground. But Gaia, seeing her children struggle, counseled Zeus to free the Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires, who still languished in the depths of Tartarus. Zeus descended into the abyss, broke their chains, and brought them forth into the light. In gratitude, the Cyclopes forged for Zeus his mighty thunderbolt, for Poseidon a trident that shook the seas, and for Hades a helm of invisibility. Armed with these gifts, the Olympians surged with new might. The Hecatonchires hurled stones with their 100 hands, shaking mountains from their roots, and the tide of battle turned. With a crash of thunder, Zeus struck down Cronus, and the Titans were defeated. Some were cast into Tartarus, chained in the deep abyss, guarded by the 100-handed giants. Others, like Oceanus, who had not joined the war, were spared. Thus ended the rule of the Titans, and the age of the Olympians began. Zeus and his brothers cast lots to divide the world. Zeus took the sky, with its thunder and storm. Poseidon took the sea, with its endless depths. Hades took the underworld, the realm of the dead. The earth itself remained common to all, under the watch of Gaia. Thus the heavens thundered with Zeus, the seas rolled with Poseidon, and the shadows deepened with Hades. A new order had risen, one that would shape both gods and mortals for ages to come. The world, once shaped by chaos, now lay under the rule of Olympus. When the Titanomachy ended, the world trembled in silence. The echoes of battle had faded, but the scars of that great war remained. Mountains were split where thunderbolts had struck, rivers had changed course under the fury of the Hecatonchires, and the earth itself still smoked from the clash of gods and titans. The titans who had opposed Zeus were cast into Tartarus, bound with chains unbreakable, guarded by the 100-handed giants who had once been imprisoned themselves. Cronus, the mighty father, lay defeated, his sickle broken, his rule ended. The age of the Titans was no more. A new order had begun, and it was the age of the Olympians. Zeus, eldest of his freed siblings though the youngest born, rose as king among gods. His strength was unmatched, his thunderbolt unstoppable, and his will firm. Yet his reign was not simply taken, it had to be confirmed, structured, and shared. With his brothers, he cast lots to divide the cosmos. To Zeus fell the sky, the vault of heaven with its clouds, storms, and stars. To Poseidon fell the sea, with its endless depths, its foaming waves, its storms and calm harbors. To Hades fell the underworld, shadowed and deep, where souls would dwell after death. The earth itself, Gaia, could not be divided, for she belonged to all and would sustain gods and mortals alike. And so, the new order of the world began, ruled not by one but by three. Yet among them, Zeus was foremost, the one whose thunder rolled across the heavens, the one whose authority none dared openly question. The shaping of Olympus. The gods established their seat upon a high mountain in Thessaly, a peak so lofty that clouds often crowned its summit. This was Mount Olympus, and upon it they built shining palaces, halls of light where they would dwell. The air there was pure, filled not with mortal breath but with ether, the divine substance. From Olympus they looked down upon the earth, upon the seas, and upon the underworld, governing all creation. Zeus took his throne, high-backed and radiant, and beside him stood his siblings. Hera, queenly and proud, became his consort. Hestia tended the sacred flame, ensuring the hearth of every household would burn with her spirit. Demeter, gentle yet stern, nurtured the earth's fertility, ensuring harvests for mortals. Poseidon claimed his trident and shook the seas. Hades, though he seldom visited Olympus, ruled over the dead with solemn justice. The younger Olympians, too, took their places as the new generation of gods arose. Athena's head in full armor, embodying wisdom and strategy. Apollo, radiant archer and lord of prophecy, music, and healing. Artemis, his twin sister, mistress of the hunt and protector of wild creatures. Hermes, swift-footed messenger and trickster. Ares, the god of war, fierce and bloody. Hephaestus, master smith and craftsman, who forged wonders for the gods. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty and desire, who stirred both gods and mortals into passion. Dionysus, joyous and wild, who brought wine and ecstasy. Thus the halls of Olympus filled with light and laughter, with feasting and song, with quarrels and rivalries, with love and betrayal. For the gods, though immortal, were not free from passions. They quarreled, they loved, they tricked one another, they punished, they rewarded. And always, their actions shaped the fates of mortals. The giants revolt. Though the Olympians reigned supreme, their rule was not unchallenged. From the blood of Uranus that had fallen upon the earth, Gaia had birthed the giants, beings vast, fierce, and monstrous. They were not titans, but a new race, stronger even than mortals could imagine, with the raw power of the earth itself flowing through their veins. Resentful of the Olympians for casting her titan children into Tartarus, Gaia stirred the giants into rebellion. They rose in fury, storming toward Olympus, hurling mountains and flaming trees, shaking the earth with their tread. The gods, though mighty, struggled against them, for it was said that no god alone could slay a giant. Only with the aid of a mortal could they be defeated, and so Zeus called upon Hercules, his mortal son, who fought alongside the gods with bow and club. Together, gods and heroes struck down the giants, binding them beneath mountains, their writhing bodies forming volcanoes that still spit fire in rage. Thus ended the Gigantomachy, the war of the giants, and the power of Olympus was secured once more. Typhon, the last monster. But Gaia was not finished. Enraged by the imprisonment of the Titans and the death of her children, she birthed one final, monstrous offspring. From the depths of the earth rose Typhon, the most terrible creature ever known. Typhon towered above mountains, his head brushing the stars. His eyes blazed fire, his arms stretched across the horizon, and from his body sprouted countless dragon heads that hissed and shrieked. His voice roared like a storm, and his wings blotted out the sun. The gods trembled before him. Many fled, transforming into animals to escape his wrath. Only Zeus stood firm, his thunderbolt blazing. He hurled bolt after bolt, striking Typhon, scorching the earth. The monster roared, lifting mountains and hurling them back. Their battle shook the very foundations of the world. At last, Zeus triumphed. He cast Typhon down and buried him beneath Mount Etna in Sicily. There he writhes still, his fiery breath escaping in eruptions, his struggles shaking the ground in earthquakes. With Typhon's defeat, the rule of Zeus was secure beyond doubt. No power remained to challenge Olympus. The order of the cosmos. Now Zeus turned to establishing order. He set the stars in the heavens, giving them their places. Some were gods transformed into constellations, others were mortals honored for their deeds. The sun was guided across the sky each day by the chariot of Helios, the moon by the silver goddess Selene, the dawn by rosy-fingered Eos. The winds were given form Boreas, the north wind, cold and harsh, Notus, the south wind, heavy with rain, Eurus, the east wind, and Zephyrus, the gentle west. The Fates, three ancient sisters, spun the thread of life for every mortal, measured it, and cut it when the time was due. Even Zeus himself bowed to their decrees. Justice, too, was established. Themis, goddess of law, stood beside Zeus, guiding his judgments. Oaths sworn by the river Styx were binding even upon gods, and none dared break them without suffering ruin. And so the world took shape, sky above, sea around, earth beneath, underworld below. Gods on Olympus, mortals upon the earth, shades in Hades. Order from chaos. Law from strife. The age of the Olympians had truly begun. With Olympus established in shining majesty, the gods turned their eyes not only to the heavens but also to the world of mortals. For though gods were immortal, their lives were entangled with those of men and women who tilled the soil, fought wars, built cities, and raised families. The Olympians, each in their own way, guided, punished, loved, or tested mortals. Some gave gifts of wisdom, some of craft, others of terror, and still others of desire. And the stories of these gods became the heart of myth, woven into the lives of humanity forever. Zeus, Lord of Thunder. Zeus, King of Gods, reigned with thunderbolt in hand. From his throne on Olympus he looked down upon kings and shepherds alike. He was the guardian of oaths and the protector of guests, punishing those who broke sacred trust. He struck liars with his bolts and rewarded those who showed hospitality. Yet Zeus was not merely a distant ruler, he was a god of passion and desire. His love affairs stretched across heaven and earth, binding gods and mortals alike into the threads of destiny. From his unions came many children, some mortal heroes, others gods of new realms. He lay with Mnemosyne, goddess of memory, and from her womb came the Muses, 9 daughters who inspired song, poetry, history, and dance. He loved Themis, goddess of law, and from her came the Hours, who governed the seasons, and the Fates, who spun and cut the lives of men. But Zeus also took mortal women into his embrace. With Alcmene he fathered Hercules, the greatest of heroes. With Danae he fathered Perseus, slayer of Medusa. With Leda he fathered Helen, whose beauty would one day set 1,000 ships upon the sea. His passion was relentless, his power unstoppable, and from him sprang generations of heroes who filled the world with deeds worthy of song. Yet Zeus was also stern. When men grew arrogant, he punished them. When they forgot the sacred bond between guest and host, he reminded them with storms and ruin. When they defied the will of heaven, he struck them down. To mortals he was both father and judge, giver of rain and wielder of lightning. Hera, queen of the gods. Beside Zeus stood Hera, his queen. She was radiant, majestic, and proud. As goddess of marriage, she presided over unions between man and woman, blessing fidelity and punishing betrayal. Yet her own marriage to Zeus was troubled, for his countless affairs filled her with wrath. Hera's jealousy was legendary. Against Zeus's lovers and their children, she often waged merciless campaigns. Io, a maiden loved by Zeus, was transformed into a cow to hide her from Hera's gaze, but Hera knew and sent a watchful guard with 100 eyes to follow her. Semele, another mortal beloved of Zeus, perished when Hera tricked her into asking to see Zeus in his true divine form. Most of all, Hera's hatred fell upon Hercules, the son of Zeus and Alcmene. From the moment of his birth, she sought to destroy him, sending serpents to his cradle. When he grew to manhood, she struck him with madness, causing him to slay his own wife and children. Yet in the end, Heracles endured and triumphed, and even Hera was forced to accept his divinity. Still, Hera was not only cruel. To those who honored marriage and family, she was a steadfast protector. In cities that revered her, she was worshipped as guardian of women, childbirth, and fidelity. She embodied both the blessings and the trials of union, the pride and pain of love bound in marriage. Poseidon, lord of the sea. Beneath the waves, Poseidon ruled. With his trident he stirred storms, shattered ships, and shook the earth in quakes. Mariners prayed to him for safe passage, sacrificing bulls or horses to calm the waters. Cities built temples to him, for none could live without the sea, yet none could tame it. Poseidon was fierce and moody. When angered, he unleashed waves that swallowed coasts. When honored, he brought calm seas and rich harvests from the ocean. He was also a god of horses, for the pounding of hooves echoed the surge of waves upon the shore. Like his brother Zeus, Poseidon's loves were many, both mortal and divine. From his unions came heroes such as Theseus, founder of Athens, and monstrous beings such as the Cyclops Polyphemus, who would one day clash with Odysseus. Yet Poseidon's pride could also be wounded. Once he and Athena contended for the patronage of a great city. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, and from the earth sprang a salt-water spring, powerful but briny. Athena planted an olive tree, symbol of peace and prosperity. The people chose Athena's gift, and the city became Athens. Though Poseidon lost, his rivalry with Athena endured through ages. Athena, goddess of wisdom. Athena was unlike any other god. She was born not from the womb, but from the head of Zeus. When he swallowed Metis, goddess of wisdom, to prevent her from bearing a child stronger than him, he thought he was safe. But in time, Zeus was struck with an unbearable pain in his head. Hephaestus struck his skull with an axe, and from the wound leapt Athena, fully armed, gleaming in armor, bearing shield and spear. Athena embodied wisdom, reason, and skill. She was goddess of crafts, of weaving and pottery, of architecture and invention. She was goddess of strategy in war, unlike Ares, who loved only bloodshed. Athena guided heroes with counsel and foresight, aiding Perseus, Hercules, Odysseus, and many others. Athena Rem.